Someone slid a number across the table. $1 million. Not a salary. Not a bonus. A quiet, carefully worded offer designed to make Caitlin Clark's presence in the WNBA entirely optional. And they thought she'd take it. She didn't. And the moment that offer died, something shifted. Not just in Indiana. Not just in the league offices. Everywhere women's basketball is watched, discussed, and monetized, the ground moved. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that single rejection is the most consequential decision in the history of women's professional sports. And here's the question worth sitting with before we go any further. If one player's absence can collapse a league's momentum, what does that tell you about how fragile the whole structure actually is? Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA in 2024 earning $76,000. Let that land for a second. $76,000 for the most watched women's basketball player in American history. Her male counterpart, the first overall pick in the NBA draft that same year, signed for $10.6 million. Same draft position, same historic rookie season. A pay gap so wide it doesn't just raise eyebrows. It raises a fundamental question about how women's professional sports has been valued for decades. But here's the part most people miss. Clark didn't publicly rage about it. She didn't demand a renegotiation on social media. She did something far more dangerous. She let the numbers speak, and then she let the results speak louder. Her jersey became the best-selling in the entire league within weeks. Not top 5. Number 1. Overnight. So why would anyone offer her $1 million to do less? Here's what the reporting quietly revealed. Certain stakeholders, sponsors, rival franchise interests, and forces uncomfortable with how rapidly one rookie was recentering the entire sport, floated financial incentives structured around Clark, reducing her public profile, softening her brand, becoming more of a team player in the business sense, less of a singular gravitational force. The offer wasn't a reward. It was a ceiling dressed up as a gift. And she said no. What does it mean when a system tries to pay down its biggest asset? It means the system is scared. Because Caitlin Clark wasn't just winning games. She was exposing exactly how much revenue the league had been leaving on the table for 30 years. Not only had WNBA attendance been quietly stagnant for over a decade, but the league's previous media deal was so undervalued that industry analysts called it one of the worst contracts in professional sports. Game over for the old model. Consider what happened to the Indiana Fever the moment Clark put on that jersey. A franchise that averaged roughly 5,000 fans per home game suddenly couldn't print tickets fast enough. Cities the Fever visited started moving WNBA games into NBA-sized arenas. Not because of a marketing campaign, not because of a new coach, because a 22-year-old from Waterloo, Iowa made people care in a way the league's entire PR infrastructure had failed to do for a generation. One sports economist, analyzing the 2024 season, estimated Clark's direct economic impact on the WNBA at somewhere north of $800 million in brand value acceleration. That's not a player. That's a franchise. That's a movement wearing number 22. And here's where the panic quietly began to take root. The rejection of that offer didn't just embolden Clark. It sent a signal through every front office, every boardroom, every sponsor negotiation happening in women's basketball. She knows exactly what she's worth. And she's not interested in being managed down to a number that's comfortable for everyone else. The league had spent years hoping a player of her magnitude would arrive. When she did, the first instinct in certain corners wasn't to celebrate. It was to contain. That containment failed. But the panic it triggered, that's still unfolding. Because what nobody in those boardrooms had accounted for, what nobody had even modeled, is that Clark had already started building something outside the league entirely. Something that didn't need the WNBA's permission to exist. And that changes everything. What do you do when the single reason your business is thriving starts operating like she doesn't need you anymore? That's not a hypothetical. That's the exact crisis WNBA executives woke up to in the months following Clark's rejection. And the answer they landed on revealed more about the league's structural panic than any press release ever could. Here's the question nobody in those offices wanted to ask out loud. Have they spent 30 years building a league, or have they spent 30 years waiting for one player to build it for them? The ratings don't lie, and in 2024, they were screaming. WNBA games featuring Clark drew television audiences that hadn't been seen in women's basketball since the late 1990s golden era of Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Swoops. But here's the number that quietly terrified network executives more than any other. On nights Clark didn't play, viewership dropped by an average of 44%. Nearly half the audience. Gone. Just like that. Not only did her presence inflate ratings to historic highs, but her absence deflated them faster than any other variable the league could measure. The WNBA hadn't built a rising tide. They'd built a Caitlin Clark delivery system, and somewhere in that realization, panic found its footing. Picture the scene inside a mid-level franchise's front office, sometime in late 2024. The analytics team pulls up the secondary ticket market data. Seats for a game against the Indiana Fever, a regular season game, in a mid-sized market on a Tuesday, are reselling for $400, $600, $900. The GM stares at the screen, then pulls up their own home game numbers for the same week. Average resale, $34. That's not a gap. That's a canyon. And every executive in that room understands simultaneously that no trade, no draft pick, no coaching hire closes a canyon like that. You don't build a Caitlin Clark. You either have her ecosystem or you don't. One veteran agent, speaking to a sports business outlet without attribution, reportedly said the quiet part plainly. Franchises that hadn't figured out how to attach themselves to Clark's momentum were already 2 years behind. 2 years behind, in a league that had only just signed its landmark $2.2 billion media deal. If the surge in Clark's impact surprised you, you already know why hitting subscribe matters. More breakdowns like this are coming, and you won't want to catch them late. Now here's the mistake almost every franchise made, and most of them are still making it. They treated the Clark effect as a marketing opportunity rather than a structural warning. They chased the optics, scheduling more primetime slots, boosting social media budgets, printing more merchandise. What they failed to do was ask the harder question: why had it taken one rookie to do what 30 years of institutional effort couldn't? The commonly overlooked mistake in women's sports business isn't underinvestment in marketing. It's underinvestment in conditions that allow greatness to become visible. Clark didn't create demand from nothing. She revealed demand that had always existed, suppressed by decades of underfunding, underexposure, and the quiet institutional assumption that women's basketball had a natural ceiling. She didn't break through a ceiling. She proved there wasn't one. And that proof, that singular, undeniable primetime-rated proof, is precisely what accelerated the boardroom scramble into something that looked, from the outside, almost like desperation. Expansion franchises suddenly fast-tracked. Salary cap conversations that had stalled for years abruptly reopened. Sponsors who had passed on WNBA partnerships for a decade started calling back. The league that had quietly accepted its own limits for 30 years was now being forced, by one 22-year-old refusal to be contained, to reckon with what it could actually become. But here is what none of those boardrooms had accounted for, and what makes the next chapter of this story the most dangerous one yet for the league's future. Clark had already started building something entirely outside the WNBA's walls. An empire that didn't require a franchise's permission, a league's approval, or a salary cap's blessing to grow. And the longer those front offices scrambled to react to what she'd already done, the further ahead she was moving. The panic wasn't about losing her to another league. It was about losing her to something the WNBA had no framework to compete with at all. Here's the twist nobody saw coming when they were busy tracking her points per game. While WNBA executives were scrambling to quantify Clark's impact on their league, Clark was quietly making the league's approval increasingly irrelevant. Not through defiance, not through drama, through something far more methodical and far more permanent. She was building equity, real equity, the kind that compounds. The NL landscape Clark navigated at Iowa was a masterclass that most professional athletes twice her age haven't managed. By the time she entered the WNBA draft, her personal brand portfolio already included partnerships with Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, and Wilson, deals that combined were estimated to dwarf her entire WNBA rookie salary many times over. Not only was she earning more from a single State Farm campaign than her annual league salary, but her licensing agreements were structured with long-term equity clauses that grew in value as her profile grew. She didn't just sign endorsement deals. She signed deals that made her a stakeholder in her own commercial universe. The WNBA has a salary cap. It has no cap on what Clark can build beside it. Now consider what that means for the league's leverage, or rather, its sudden lack of it. For decades, professional sports leagues operated on a foundational assumption. The league confers legitimacy on the player. You need us to be somebody. Clark's financial architecture quietly dismantled that assumption in real time. Ask yourself this. If a player's off-court income, brand value, and cultural influence already exceed what the league can offer by an order of magnitude, what exactly is the league providing that she cannot source elsewhere? The answer, uncomfortably for those front offices, is narrowing by the season. One sports business analyst framed it precisely. The traditional leverage relationship between league and superstar has inverted. Clark doesn't need the WNBA's platform nearly as much as the WNBA needs hers. And here's the overlooked mistake franchises across the league keep making. Even now, even after everything the 2024 season demonstrated, they are still pricing Clark's value in basketball metrics. Points, assists, Rookie of the Year votes. Those numbers matter, but they are not where her real power lives. Her real power lives in attention, in the economy of who people show up for. A franchise that builds its future around attracting players who can win championships is thinking correctly. A franchise that fails to understand that one player permanently altered what showing up means for an entire generation of fans. That franchise is already losing a game it doesn't know it's playing. Youth basketball registrations among girls aged 6 to 12 surged across the country during her rookie season. Those aren't future ticket buyers. Those are future devotees. And they came into the sport with her face, her number, and her logo 3 already burned into their imagination. So what actually happens if she walks? Not to a rival league, not to retirement. What if Clark simply expands, shifts her primary identity from WNBA player to global sports figure who occasionally plays in the WNBA, the way certain soccer icons outgrew their clubs while still wearing the jersey? The emerging reality in women's sports is that the athletes who understand their own brand architecture are beginning to operate on a scale that franchises genuinely cannot contain. Clark is not the last player this will happen with. She is the first one doing it visibly enough that the entire industry is being forced to adapt in real time. The WNBA's next 5 years will be defined not by which team wins a championship, but by whether the league can build infrastructure worthy of the talent it now, finally, has the world's attention to attract. What began with a rejected $1 million offer quietly exposed something the league had never been forced to confront. That the gap between what its players are worth and what they've been paid isn't just an injustice. It's a structural vulnerability. Clark didn't just refuse a number. She refused a ceiling. And in doing so, she handed every player who comes after her a higher floor to stand on. The panic in those boardrooms isn't really about Caitlin Clark. It's about what happens when a system built on undervaluing its greatest asset finally meets someone who knows, down to the decimal point, exactly what she's worth. She knows. And now, so does everyone watching. The only question left is whether the league moves fast enough to deserve what she's building, or whether she simply builds it without them. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not professional financial, legal, or sports industry advice. Always consult a qualified expert before making decisions based on the information presented here.